Hello, and thank you so much for clicking on this video. It really does mean a lot to me that you're giving it a shot. In today's episode, I speak with Steve DeBoard. Steve DeBoard is a retired police officer from IPD. He spent a few years in homicide detective, also vice and sex crimes. He discusses what it was like being in each one of those specialties, some of the cases that he's been on and things he's had to go through and deal with, and also the things that officers deal with tragically on a daily basis. So please stick around for the rest of this video. Listen to some pretty cool stories. He speaks with the serial killer and talks about how they caught him, and also some of the cases that really have stuck with him through the years. If you enjoy this, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Comment anything you really liked or just something that you learned or something you'd like to hear more of about the video. Steve also has his own podcast called Running Towards Evil. Focuses on the 3 M's: murder, mystery, and mayhem. I'll tag his podcast down in the description. That way you can subscribe to it. It's anywhere podcasts are at. Apple, Google, Spotify, Castbox, Breakerbox, anywhere at all. He has got some pretty good quality stuff out there. I enjoyed listening to it. He's got a great voice too. So I really hope you guys enjoy this video. Awesome. All right. Well, sir, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Doing pretty good. It's a cold day. I was out mowing this morning.
It's a wet day to mow.
It was real wet. So, other than that, how was your drive here?
Well, let's see. I saw 2 police cars waiting at the side of the road. One had one car stopped, but it was drizzly, gray, wet. The roads are wet, so everybody's driving kind of slow.
Awesome. So, go ahead and introduce yourself and talk about a little bit of your career, your history in law enforcement as a homicide detective, and then all the way up to you being a professor and just recently retiring.
All right. My name's Steve DeBoard. I've lived in Indianapolis probably 95% of my life. I lived in Kankakee, Illinois, when I was the director of public safety at the university, Olivet Nazarene University. And we were there about 2 years, but we wanted to come back to Indianapolis. So we did, and the chief wanted me to come back and work as the late shift commander of the new arrestee processing center we had in Marion County prior to the merge of county and the city into one unit. So I did that, and I didn't really like working in the prison system or in the jail system. I'd rather drop them off and leave. It's a whole different story when you have to stay with them. So after a couple of years, I moved on to that, and I had been going to school after I graduated and finished my bachelor's and finished a master's, and I started teaching. And then I was working on a PhD, but I never finished it. It's a lot of work, and I was just getting too old to be able to get tenureship as a professor.
And how old were you when you went back to college?
When I went back to college, I was probably 49, 50 when I went back.
50? Wow.
Yeah.
I tried it for one semester and wasn't for me.
Well, here's the ironic aspect that I went in 1971 to Olivet Nazarene College, the same college that I became the director of public safety at. And I was there for 2 years, and I decided, this really isn't for me right now. So I left, and I just kind of traveled for the next couple of years. And it was fun. I had a good time. Would I do it again? No, I probably wouldn't. But I did enjoy myself when I was doing that. So I came back and to Indianapolis. My dad wanted me to come back and help him with a house that he was working on. And I did that for a while. Then I got a job with the, my first policing job was with the Indianapolis Public School Police. And I was there for 2 or 3 years. And then I went on to the IUPUI Police Department for another couple of years. And then I got hired on to Indianapolis Police Department in 1977. That's when the classes started. I was hired in 75 or 76. And So when I started that, then life just took over. I didn't go back to school like I thought I was going to. I started working for a living, and I loved being a policeman so much that I wanted to do nothing else to detract from what I was working at. I told one of the guys, we didn't have field training officers back then. One of the guys that I was working with, I said, hey, did you watch that episode of SWAT, the original SWAT, on TV the other night? And he goes, I don't have to watch SWAT. I live it every day.
That is pretty nice.
That's pretty nice. So I ended up retiring after 21 years with the police department. While I was on the police department, I rode motorcycles. Got into a chase with a guy, not on the motorcycle, but on a drunk driving task force that I was working. I was in a car, and I tried to stop him, and he ran. Got up on the far northwest side of the city. He bailed out of his car. I went to chase him, and I went by his car, and I saw a gun sitting in the seat. Thought, oh, this guy's serious business. He dropped his gun on the way out of the car to run. So I ran around the side of the building, and when I did, he popped up to hit me. Well, I hit him first, and I felt this really sharp pain in my left hand. So I hit him with my right hand, put him on the ground, but I couldn't cuff him because both my hands were broken.
Really?
So I'm by myself, and I was able to get on the radio to call for some help. But fortunately, he didn't try to fight me anymore. He didn't know the extent of my injuries. So I was off work for a few months because of that, trying to get him healed up and had pins put in. So after that, I really didn't want to ride sickles anymore. So the commander of sickles asked me what I'd like to do, and I said, well, I'd like to work undercover for a while. And so I went to Vice and worked undercover in Vice for 3 or 4 years.
Did you grow your hair out and have a beard and everything?
Not the whole time. My job was, for the most part, was pornography and child pornography. Mm-hmm. We used to have a lot of bookstores in Marion County and in Indianapolis at that time, porno bookstores, and pretty much unregulated. So our job was to go in, pick the worst movies we could find, or there was an ordinance about having sex toys on display at the time, and plus the fact that in these porno shops, they had little cubby holes. And on the back door of every cubby hole, once you close the door, was a little screen. You put in a quarter, and you get 2 minutes worth of a porno movie.
Oh.
But in the wall adjacent to the cubby hole next to you, there was a hole in the wall.
Oh, no.
It was called a glory hole.
Oh, my goodness.
And that was to have sexual relations through that. And so there was a lot of those. And I locked up, well, the Vice Squad, we locked up so many because we'd go in there undercover. Mm-hmm. We'd get in one of those cubby holes, and then things would happen, and
a surprise comes.
The surprise coming through the cubby hole, and we'd go over acting like we wanted to be with them in their booth, and then lock them up. And of course, I ran into every career field: attorneys,
really,
ministers, teachers, you name it, that would go in there and do this for anonymous sex.
Yeah. Anybody you ever recognized?
No, nobody that I recognized.
That'd be weird. You see your neighbor in there. Bill?
So I was in Vice for a while, and I had the opportunity to go to Homicide. Mm-hmm. And that's just was a dream come true, to be able to get into Homicide. And I worked Homicide for 4 years. And the only reason I left Homicide was because I'd gotten custody of my son. Mm-hmm. And Homicide at that time meant that if you catch a homicide, you have to stay for the next 36 to 40 hours to continue to work that homicide, go to bed, get about 4 hours sleep, and get back in there and get back on it. I don't think it's that way anymore because of the overtime. But when these parental responsibilities come along, you have to do what you have to do. So after 4 years I left. But man, the adventures I had in homicide and the people that I worked with and the suspects and the victims and the witnesses, it's its whole, I used to call it's a career in a career. Homicide is a career within the police department because there's so much going on. And it's so time consuming and mind consuming because it takes your whole effort physically and mentally and emotionally. So it was a great time that I had in there, and I would have stayed longer. I probably would have finished out my career in homicide had I not gotten the opportunity to raise my son.
That's beautiful. It's so you would obviously see whatever actions that had happened from somebody murdering someone else.
Mm-hmm.
The scene would be preserved for you,
Mm-hmm.
and you guys would get there. Around roughly how long would it take for you guys to get the call and then to show up on scene to start your investigation?
Well, homicide was in the city county building at the time, right downtown, and we get a run, and we could get anywhere within 20 minutes at the most. But sometimes we were out on the street too, working another murder, and we get a call, and we'd have to go to the newest one. So it was 20 minutes at the longest, I would say, for the most part, and 5 or 10 minutes sometimes to get to the scene. But we were fortunate in that we had our own crime scene unit, a good-sized crime scene forensics unit, and then the police officers on the scene really did a great job of holding the scene until we got there. Then we got crime lab there, and as a homicide detective, we would make sure the scene is secured, that the officers secured it as large as we may want it, because sometimes they might preserve an area that's not quite big enough for us, that maybe it extended out another block, and we wanted that whole block because maybe we found out something once we got into the house or started talking to witnesses. So we would get that taken care of. Crime lab would take care of the pictures. We'd consult with them as they're going through taking pictures and taking video, because there's certain things that we wanted on top of what they already knew to do. And so we were able to work really closely together with that. And then the process, once the crime lab was done, then we could go through the scene of the house, starting where the body is, and then moving out to the different rooms of the house, because we want to make sure if we find a body in a bedroom, maybe it actually happened in the kitchen, and then the body was taken into the bedroom, or vice versa. The whole house could be a crime scene. Not that we'd let anyone in it anyway, but we had to make sure that we had all of our ducks in a row, that we become very detail-oriented, and look for as many clues as we possibly can.
So what would be some of the details that first cross your mind once you get there?
What happened? What we'd ask the officer on the scene, because usually they're going to have time before we get there to perhaps get an idea of what may have happened. Maybe a witness is there, maybe a family member is there, or a friend was there at the time that this happened, and they'll fill us in. And just as a real gut shot of what they got in the very beginning. Obviously, it can't be very detailed, but it's a good outline for us to start with. Then we can go in and talk to the same people again, look at the crime scene to see what was told to us, if it matched what we see in the crime scene. Crime scene tells its own story, and you got to pay attention to that, because people will tell you one thing and it really happened another. Witnesses are great, but you have to find evidence to back up what a witness says. It's a great starting point, but if a witness says, well, so-and-so did it, you just can't go out and lock up so-and-so. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to get the evidence against them, because sometimes witnesses think they see things that they didn't really see. Colors, types of cars, height of a suspect, race of a suspect, male or female. So it's very difficult, and it's very intricate details that you really have to look for.
What have been some of the cases that have really stuck out to you that were in your career as a detective in homicide?
Well, one's Alice Vaughan, and I gave this on my podcast.
Yes. But tell everybody about your podcast, too.
Well, I have a podcast by the name of Running Towards Evil, and we deal with the 3 M's: murder, mystery, and mayhem. And I've got 8 episodes out, and unlike yours, I don't have video, it's just audio. But they're interesting cases, and I did talk about Alice Vaughan on 2 different occasions. Alice Vaughan was an older lady that was murdered in her home. Someone had come into the home, tied her up, shot her with birdshot or rat shot. And you could tell by the blood spatters, by the position on her body, by where the bullet wounds were. And in this particular case, right above where she would have been kneeling initially, right above her was a shot into the ceiling of the birdshot. So that made us wonder, well, wait a minute, why is that? Well, we came to the conclusion that they wanted information. They had the gun on her. They wanted to prove to her that they meant business, so fired a shot into the ceiling to scare her. Whatever it was that they were asking about, and I'll tell you what it is that I think they were asking about, was drugs. Alice had nothing to do with drugs, but her roommate, her lesbian lover, much younger girl than her, dealt very vigorously in drugs. And she was doing drugs constantly, buying drugs, doing drug deals, didn't work anywhere, and that's how she made her money. But Alice loved her and let her stay. So they didn't get the information, so they knew they had to end up killing her, and they did. And we were able to kind of go through the motions of her body when she was hit with each shot, based upon where she landed and where the blood spatters were on the walls, on the ceiling, on the walls, on the rug, on the bed. And we worked that case, and every day that we worked it, we found out something new by talking to witnesses. And it's been since 1988, the case hasn't been solved. Now, here's the kicker to that. I retired in 1997, and at our department, you never get rid of an unsolved homicide. Never. The evidence with it, let alone any files. The evidence was in the property room. 4 boxes of interviews, statements, pictures, you name it. The other evidence was at the crime lab, so that was preserved, but nothing else. When I retired, a lieutenant, for some reason, decided that it was time to get rid of it. So he destroyed all of my case files on her murder. And it would be nearly impossible at this time to be able to go back and work that unsolved murder. And I talked to the family for years after I retired. As a matter of fact, one of the victim's grandnieces was a student in my college class.
Wow, what was that like?
Well, she was really a good girl and a good student. And occasionally we would talk about it. And I'd ask how her parents and grandparents were. But it was kind of strange that much time had passed. It made me realize how much time had passed. Mm-hmm. And it always makes you feel bad when you have one of those cases that just doesn't get solved.
So with that case, did anything ever happen with that lieutenant?
No.
Nothing? Really? No punishment or nothing? No write-ups?
No punishment. One other thing, let me bring this up, is that Alice Vaughan had a car. She worked at the old GM plant here in Indianapolis. And she had a red and white, I think it was a Ford, and it wasn't in the house. She was at the house. A suitcase she had in the car, according to her roommate, was on the kitchen floor, cut open. So we knew they were looking for something. And as I say, we think it's drugs. But Alice wasn't into that, the victim. But her car was missing. Well, we've now been working about 24 hours on this case. The next morning I get a phone call. And this happened November the 8th, I believe, or November the 7th, 1986 or 88. I know it was on election day. And get a phone call saying that the police had been called to the scene of a car on fire way on the south side of town. And the plate, the VIN, or the vehicle identification number, came back to Alice Vaughan. So we go blasting down there, and it's her car on fire. Somebody had taken it to the south side of town and burned it. The only thing that was in that car that was left was a 6th grade textbook with the name of a person in it. And come to find out through the investigation, Alice had lived with the mother of this young man who also had another brother. And he lived less than half a mile away from where the car was burning. So when you get something like that, you think, man, that's fantastic. And all of a sudden you're thinking, man, I'm going to close this case out. You go over there, you talk to him, you do the investigation, you interview his family, neighbors, kind of like starting over again. But he didn't have anything to do with it. It was a coincidence. For someone to say there are no coincidences, I don't believe that. There are coincidences. These things can throw you off track, throw off your mojo, and really complicate the investigation. So, but the fact of the matter was, we did find it, and we were able to rule out at least this person for the murder.
Obviously, I'm not an officer, I'm not a cop. So trying to sit and think about investigation kind of stuff, and is the whole, we talked earlier, like the good cop, bad cop, like you running me through an interrogation with a criminal or somebody, or not, you can't say criminal, I guess, because there's just a person that's in line of questioning or whatever it is called.
Suspect.
A suspect. Yeah, they're a suspect in the case. Like as much training I have is from watching 48 Hours. And
gotcha.
That's a great show, and it's I
love it.
I find it very. Is it seem to be similar to that, like with what you did?
Yeah, I mean, I still watch like the ID channel and all of these true crime mysteries on television. I wish that they had been on television when I was doing Homicide. I think I could have learned quite a bit.
Really?
Yeah. And I look at this stuff now and think, man, but we didn't have computers. We didn't have cell phones. We had to get out there and really pound the pavement, literally, to get our witnesses and to find people. It's not nearly as easy as it is today. And that doesn't mean, just because you have all of that stuff, doesn't mean that solving a murder is any easier because you're dealing with people. You're not dealing with technology now. Technology makes it easy to find people, but what are you going to do when you get them? So my partner and I had established a great routine, and it was the good cop, bad cop routine. Judd Green was my partner, and he came on as a nice guy. That's just the way he was. And I would let him talk, And if the guy wasn't cooperating, because I would just sit there and stare at him. And if he wasn't really cooperating, or if he was being smart aleck or whatever the case may be, Judd would say, you really don't want me to leave the room and leave you here with him, because that's not going to end up well for you. I'm willing to give you a break now if you tell us what happened. I'll talk to the prosecutor. I'll let you say whatever you want to about what happened. And then I'd come in and say, just let me talk to you for a little bit. And I would say, you want a cup of coffee? Oh, yeah, I'll take a cup of coffee. Or do you want a Coke? Yeah, I'll take Coke. And I don't know why, but a lot of suspects always say, yeah, I want a coffee with 4 creams and 27 sugars. So I'd bring him coffee with cream and no sugar. Do you know why that I would do that?
Why?
Because it showed who was in control. He didn't get what he wanted. I gave him what I wanted him to have. So I'd let him drink the coffee. And we'd sit there and we'd be talking about the case. And I said, boy, you didn't say that to the other detective. Now, why are you lying now or later? And he might say something like, well, he's been drinking coffee. I got to go to the restroom. Well, yeah, sure, you can go to the restroom as soon as you answer my question. And so now he's got to go, so he wants to answer the question. And then we'd let him up and go. And no, I never let him sit in the seat until he wet his pants in the seat. That never happened. And it was just a tactic that we can use. Or we might go in there and the good guy, Detective Green, might be talking to him, and it just doesn't seem like he's cooperating very much. So I'd say, Judd, show him this. And I'd slide over a folder that said evidence. And he, oh, no, I don't want to show him this yet. I want him to come out on his own to tell us what happened before we do this. The suspect would be looking at it and think, oh, evidence, what do they have on me? Again, another tactic. Let him think we have something we don't have. I think the bottom line is this.
That's like playing poker.
It is. There. The bottom line is this. I would never go to the police department if I were guilty and let them talk to me without a lawyer. That's the craziest thing in the world. But they do it because they think they're smarter.
Yeah. So to anybody out there who's going to be getting arrested or who does get arrested and they get taken in for questioning, don't say anything until your lawyer is present, right?
Right.
Yeah. See? How hard is that?
You got it.
It's coming from, someone like myself. Get you a lawyer. A good one. Not one of them lazy loser ones.
Well, we would always say, can you afford a good attorney? And, well, no, I'm going to get a public defender. I said, oh, geez.
That's not good.
You're going to get a public defender? You know where public defenders come from, right? He went, law school. And I said, yeah, but at the bottom of the class. That's why they're public defenders. Now, that's not true, but they thought it might be true. So, again, it's just another tactic. The Supreme Court says we can lie to these people.
Really?
Oh, yeah. We could say that so-and-so's just gave a statement saying that you were there. And he hadn't said anything. But if we can make him believe it and he gives a statement, then we'll do the same thing to the other guy.
So what about, because I know I've listened to some cases where some of the criminals that were suspects that were charged with a crime, they would give another statement afterwards stating, oh, they coerced me to give this statement that ended up not being true. And then they gave another statement. So what would happen there? Would there have to be another investigation on that?
Sure, there would be. And then the prosecutor's office is going to investigate, and maybe the attorney for the suspect. And you have to be really careful. I mean, there were days in the long ago past that you could do a lot of different things and nobody's going to say anything. But that's why every interview should be videotaped and have audio with it. That way they can't say they were coerced. Now, I've seen some videotapes where it was clear that they were coerced, they were given the words to say, and they were taken advantage of. Maybe because their mental capacity wasn't at the age that they are. Maybe it was because it was a younger person who could be easily influenced. I worked at never trying to do that. In fact, I had one guy in there that I thought was involved in a murder, and in talking to him, it was clear that he had a very low IQ and that there may have been some kind of emotional problems that went along with it. And I just never believed that he ever had anything to do with the murder. He may have known about the guys that were involved in the murder, which I doubt, but you have to be real careful of how easily folks like that can be influenced and made to say what you want them to say. So does that still happen today? Obviously, yes. And that's a really hard thing. I don't like to see that. I don't like to hear about it. I don't like to see people on death row getting off because of misconduct by the police or the prosecutor's office. That's just cheap shyster stuff. And if you can't be smarter than the criminal, then you probably don't deserve to be where you are.
So with have you ever had the thought, because this is what I've always thought, we'll sit there and we'll talk, like, I'll sit there and listen to the cops talk to people, kind of investigate while on scene, and they'll be like, all right, well, you're free to go. You got nothing. And then they leave. And I'm like, what if that person's the mastermind behind it? And could they be just a really good actor and pretend that they're not? Have you ever had that thought? Oh, sorry, I could switch this over to myself. Have you ever had that thought that after interrogating somebody or a suspect, that the guy's told such a good story, you get home, you hang your jacket up on your coat rack, you crack open a beer, and you're like, oh, God dang, he could have been lying to me, and he's good. Or it comes out that it was just unsolved, and you're like, maybe you interviewed and talked to the murderer, but they gave such a good story that it's because I'm a very trusting person. I couldn't do that job because I'd be like, you said you didn't. All right, buddy. I believe you.
I'm going to give you an example of exactly how I did that. This happened to me.
Oh, no.
October of probably about 1978, because I was still pretty much a rookie at the time. Get a call. The medics are already at the house. It's about the 2000 block of Central. And we get there. Medics are working on the older lady, the victim. I can't really see her face or anything in her body. I asked the medics, I said, what's it look like? Well, we don't know. He said she fell down the stairs. Her son was there, and I'm wearing a lightweight jacket. It's October weather, fall weather, and I'm talking to him. Now, again, I'm still probably in my rookie year, or real close to it. And this guy's got a T-shirt on, and he's sweating up a storm. I didn't have the experience to know at the time what might be the reason behind that. So I talked to him. He gave his story. I took a statement, and I put it in my report and let him go. So I leave. I get off work that night, and I go to a part-time job. And I get a phone call from Homicide. Were you at 2000 Central at the Love House? I said, yeah. He said, did you know she was murdered? I said, what? I had no idea. I couldn't even see her. The medics were all over her. I couldn't see her. He said, well, did you wait until they weren't all over her to see what happened to her? No. You need to come to the office right now. Oh, man. Come to find out, her son had already left. He skipped town. He actually killed her. He threw her down the steps, according to witnesses. I didn't talk to all the witnesses. I made a serious mistake, a mistake that I never made again. He was gone for 6 months to a year. They finally found him in New Orleans, arrested him and brought him back, and he was convicted of his mom's murder. Through no help of my own. I made an egregious mistake, one that I would never make again. So, yes, that is a big mistake. Now, you're not going to arrest everybody you think that might have been involved. You're going to let them go. But you have to know how to get a hold of them. You check their ID with who they tell you they are. And if they don't have ID, which a lot of them didn't have, then you check through dispatch if they have a criminal history. And that way you're going to get all the information on them that way. So you know where to go to get them if it's necessary at a later time.
What does suck that we run into a lot with where I work is not a lot. We would see it often, too often, from my opinion, where you'd have a abusive relationship where a female is being abused or a male is being abused by the female, but you really can't do anything about it. You can't, you can tell the officer and the officer's going to say, there's no evidence of it. They're not complaining of it. She's not speaking up. He's not speaking up. Would you ever have cases where you were certain who committed the murder, but you just didn't have the evidence to push towards that person being the one that convicted or that did the murder? Would you ever have any of those types of cases?
Yeah, we did. Several times. You just don't have the evidence to give you probable cause to arrest somebody for murder. Now, you might have some circumstantial evidence, and there have been cases won with circumstantial evidence, but mostly that kind of evidence was pretty overwhelming. And it's always best to try to have physical evidence along with the circumstantial evidence just to give it a good case, because prosecutors don't want to lose. I'll guarantee you. They want the best case possible because they'll tell you to go back out and get more. And you think, I've got enough here to get a conviction. No, we need more. So that happens a lot, and it's very frustrating. So what we can do is maybe this person has a warrant out for their arrest. And I did this on a guy. Wait until about 5 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday morning. You know they've been out partying all night. You go to their house with a warrant early in the morning because you know they're going to go home and sleep it off. Get them, lock them up, bring them down to headquarters because they're under arrest now. There's no choice whether they can go or not. And then bring them into the questioning room and start talking to them again about the warrant. But also, if they want to talk, if they agree to talk, then you can start talking to them about the murder again. You've got them at a very vulnerable time psychologically and emotionally because they're really tired. They were out the night before. So any advantage that you can have, you need to take advantage of it. And that's one of those, again, tactics, a tactical advantage that you have if there's a warrant out for their arrest. Otherwise, you keep paying attention to where they go, what they do. I had this one murder of a young girl. Her body was found at the corner of 34th and Massachusetts Avenue. She was in the car. She was in the back seat. She'd been shot behind the ear and in the right breast. The anomaly here was that her face was covered. I said, well, why would that be? Well, it's because in a lot of cases, a person who's close to the victim, if the suspect and the victim had some kind of a strong relationship, they don't want to see the eyes because they're afraid that the guilt lets them think that I'm the last image that they have in their eyes. And that really kind of horrifies me, and I don't want that, so they cover them up. And this one guy just knew that he killed her. He was a car thief, and I was able to arrest him as a car thief, but I had not nearly enough to get him for the murder. So one day I get word he's with his new girlfriend in a hotel. We drive around, I see his car, get the information from the desk at the hotel, knock on the door, and I said, hey, it's Detective DeBoard, you need to open up. And so finally comes the door and he's butt naked. His girlfriend's in the bed. I said, why didn't you get clothes on before you entered through the door, man? He said, well, I was asleep. I didn't hear you. You didn't hear me knocking. Okay.
Yeah, you're going to answer the door naked anyways.
Yeah. And so I said, can we come in? He goes, yeah, you can come in. Well, you know how hotels rooms are, cheap hotel rooms. There's the beds, and then there's an opening with a mirror and a dressing table and a Kleenex box, and you can see all of it right there. So I go in there and I look. We're talking to him. I look at the Kleenex box off to my right, and in this silver metallic Kleenex box that's built into the wall with the Kleenex hanging out of it is the butt of a gun.
Nice.
And I think, what the heck? I go over there. I take that gun, get Crime Lab out there to package it up for evidentiary value. And that was the very gun that killed the girl. If I had not stayed on him and followed him and paid attention to him, I may never have come across that gun or actually solved that case, even though I knew that it had to be him, because she had been his girlfriend. They had talked together on the phone the day of the murder.
Did he ever give any reasons why he did it?
No, his new girlfriend, actually, I think she was probably involved in killing her. But I think he went to meet her and got her in the back seat of the car like they were going to make out, got her back there and killed her. And then went back to his hotel where she was staying, and he had been staying earlier. They made a record that they were at that hotel all night. She said he was at the hotel all night. But when we got the information, the gun, she changed her story. Well, he got up and he left. I forgot, but he did get up and leave. And he never said why he did it. But his fingerprints were on the gun. It was the gun that killed her. And
how were you able to tell that it was the actual gun that killed her? Right, like the casing, and then you have in the barrel the marking.
I did leave that out, but there were still bullets in her. Mm-hmm. There were 2 bullets in her. They were small caliber, so it was probably a 28 or a 22 or a 38 caliber gun. They found out the caliber when they dug them out of her during the autopsy, so we knew what kind of gun we were looking for. I mean, if I remember correctly, it was a 38. And this gun was a 38, and what they did was once you get a possible murder weapon, you take it down to the crime lab, they shoot it into a big tub full of water or foam or whatever it is that slows the bullet down. But what they're trying to determine is if the rings around the actual bullet that comes out of the shell match the rings in the barrel. And if they do, then you have a perfect match because each one's different.
Oh, that's very cool. So if I ever commit a murder, I use different guns and toss that
Yeah,
one.
use a smooth bore gun. But that would be a pistol. All rifles are smooth bore.
Yeah.
But a pistol has the rings in it.
So I don't know if it's legal or not, but if somebody was to commit a murder, I was told by this when I worked at McDonald's. This might sound stupid, but somebody told me when I was working at McDonald's. Oh snap! They said if you ever want to get away with a murder, you know how to do it. I said I don't know. They said call in a missing body. So after you commit the murder, call in a missing body, and it's in that area. It's in some area in the woods. After they go and they start sniffing around, if they dig up a spot, like the officers dig up a spot, go to that spot where they already dug up, dig a little bit deeper, and then put the body in underneath that, then pile it back up, and then there you go. I'm like, I don't know about that. They said, dude, it's perfect because if the dog's already sniffed in that area, because if you've already committed that murder and you said it's there, the dog sniffed in that area, they dug in that area, they said, we found nothing here. And then you go to that same area, you dig there, you dig deeper, you put it there, you put it back up top. If the dog does come back, they're like, no, we just dug here. That's not a problem. And then you keep on going. Does that sound stupid or does it sound like a decent, I'm not saying go out and do this, but would that be something that would be
Well, I mean, that's
feasible?
It's not a bad idea, but remember this. In the police world, the suspect always goes back to the scene of a crime.
Oh, no.
So just because you dug in one spot
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you don't need to search the area around that. And the dog is a body dog will still get the scent of the body that you buried under the hole that they'd already dug. Now, I suppose you could be like, what's his name? Dexter, the serial killer.
That's a great show. Yeah,
And the new one.
I haven't seen the new
Oh,
episodes
it's
yet.
fantastic. It's good. He buried a body underneath his fire pit.
That's not bad.
Not bad. Does that mean that the dog won't catch it? Every dog's different. You know, as far as how long has the dog been out before he sniffs that area? Is he tired? How many smells has he had? So it makes it kind of tough. So anything could work. You could leave the body in a tree and maybe somebody won't see it for months. But on the other hand, you're still taking a chance. So I've never taken a class in Body Disposal 101. I'm sure there's probably something close to it. But the one thing that people think won't happen to them does happen to them. If it can happen, it will happen. So, yeah, that probably wouldn't be a good idea. Although it sounds good on the surface, it's probably not a good idea.
It sounded good when I heard it.
Yeah.
I kind of believed it. I was like, man, that probably would be a pretty good idea. We're not condoning murder.
No, we're not condoning murder.
Not condoning it at all. What we are condoning is doing the right thing.
Well, you know what? You would think that if you took a body out into the ocean and dumped it out of a plane in the middle of the ocean, that you get away with it. Not if the police suspect you, because they're going to wonder, well, let's trace his movements back for 3 months. And they find that you went out to a local airport, rented a plane, flew the plane out to a certain section of the ocean, and flew back. Boy, that would be pretty suspicious.
That would be suspicious. My brother does have his pilot's license.
That would be pretty
and
suspicious.
we do go over the ocean. No, that would be really, man. But how many bodies go? Because here's another thing too. Like I love serial killer. No, I take that back. I love a good serial killer story of them being like their whole story from start to finish, and the finish being that means they're flipping that switch and they're getting electrocuted, or they're being hung, which is back in the 70s earlier, or lethal injection. They're getting what they deserved. But I love hearing the stories of, okay, how does it happen, and how can I avoid being a victim to one of them? Because like it's in my mind, it is so scary to think that there are people out there that get off on the idea of harming others. Of obviously in our career fields that we had, you had how many years did you do police work?
With Indianapolis Police Department, I did 21 years.
Okay, so with your full career of police work, it's like for us in the medical field and everything is do no harm. You know, you're sitting there, you're trying to do what's best for that person, but there's people out there that do harm, and that's what their thing is.
Yeah,
and it's insane to hear that. I've watched a few interviews. Well, you listened to the interview with Charles Manson after he committed who was that chick? Was it not Sharon Tate? Was it
Sharon Tate?
Sharon Tate. After they murdered her, his Coney's little murdered her,
and Bianchi.
Yeah, it was something weird. It was a weird name. And just looking at him and how insane he looked, and the noises and sounds he was making and the facial expressions, and sitting there thinking, like, there are people still out there today that are into this.
Do you know what they say about how many serial murders are walking this country?
I was about to ask you. There's a percentage that was given, or there was a number that was given of how many unknown serial killers that are out there today that have still not been caught.
Well, years ago, when I was working a case on a serial killer, we were at the understanding that there's probably about 8 at any given time, but that's not even realistic. The real number, now that I'm older and done more research on it, is that it's 40 or more serial killers roaming around the country at any given time. Look, since 1980 until now, there's been approximately 260,000 unsolved murders in this country.
Goodness.
Can you believe that?
I'm looking up something real quick. 160,000? 260,000.
No, wait, I take that back. There's been that many murders. You know what? Now that I say that, I'm questioning myself about what I said.
But still, anything over 50,000 to me would be an incredible amount.
Oh, yeah. And bear this in mind, Indianapolis Police Department, when I was in homicide, and I'm not saying this bragging that we were better than the detectives now that they've got, but it was a different time, and no social media, not the drug center that it was, but in the 80s, our homicide solve rate was about 90%.
That's pretty good.
When now their solve rate is about 40%, Indianapolis Metro Police.
Oh my gosh.
So, yeah, I think right now there's probably with DNA, it's changing things because they are solving cases through DNA, but it's like 160. There's still about 160,000 unsolved murders out there. So, can you get away with murder? Yeah. Probably because you're just daggone lucky.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a whole lot of smart murders out there, but then again, you have to look in the days of the mafia, how many murders were done that were never found out. You know.
Well, who was that the one famous guy that got murdered by the mafia? And the rumor is that he was buried underneath some football turf or something.
I know who you're talking about.
But there was a TV show that was called Mindhunter. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. I think it's a Netflix series TV show, and it was the start of them coining the term serial killer.
Yes.
And every time I always think of serial killer, I always think of somebody holding a box of cereal, and that's all I think of. And they're like serial killer, like you stab in a box of cereal.
Yeah.
It's stupid, but that's my brain. That's how it works. I could never be a murderer. But they coined the term serial killer, and they had these guys from the FBI, I believe, that were involved in basically researching who the first person they were going to deem as the first serial killer and get that name term or the coin term. And in it, they actually interviewed somebody who killed multiple people because they had a different name for it. They one of the guys was Edmund Kemper.
Oh, yes.
And Edmund Kemper was like this 6'10" giant dude with a mustache.
Yes.
And he ended up killing his mother, and I believe used her head to do fellatio on himself, but also all the college, he worked at a college, and all the college girls that he killed there, because he lived with her, that he killed there, he would bury them in the yard and then have their heads looking up at her underneath the ground. So they'd all be facing her room.
Wow.
That way everyone's always looking up to you, mother, is what he said. And I'm like, oh, that is so creepy. But imagine talking to somebody like that. I've spoke with people who have killed others and killed others in combat. I haven't spoken with somebody who's done it in a civilian life. But there's a difference in the way they talk. There's something I would notice either more passion in their talk, not compassion, but more passion in what they were talking about. And I'm not going to sit here and say I know the reasons why, because I have no idea, but I would always notice that when I would talk with somebody about that. And every time I've watched an interview with a serial killer, a lot of them really seemed like the ego was inflated, that they were getting the attention. And now with media today is whenever there's a school shooting, which there was one, I believe, yesterday. I haven't done any research on it. I have no idea what happened. I just heard about it, and that's all. Like I listened to in the Daily Wire, they will not state the name of the person, nor give them any airtime.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that actually discourages some people from wanting to commit those types of crimes, because then they'll think, oh man, I'm not going to be getting any attention, might as well not do it? Or do you think it doesn't matter?
It doesn't matter. I don't think it matters. They're going to kill because they have a compunction to kill. Yes, you have like the Son of Sam, and you've got the Atlanta child murderer. You've got the Green River killer. If, like, the Green River killer sent a message to the police.
Can you explain a little bit about that?
Oh, the Green River killer killed numerous prostitutes on the West Coast, and would put their bodies out. I don't know exactly if they were just displayed or he'd just dump them. But this went on for years and years. As a matter of fact, the serial killer that my partner and I caught here, I thought this could be the Green River killer because he's been out there. But it turned out it wasn't him anyway. But that's just to let you know that there's multiple serial killers out walking around this country every minute of every day. So we did the Green River killer. He wrote in and he got the attention that he sought from the police and from the media. Now, there's no police officer, there's no homicide detective that isn't going to take a phone call from a serial killer. Mm-hmm. He says, hey, I want to talk to you about these murders. And he'll talk to you, and whether he's playing games with you or whether he's teasing you or whether he's trying to give you something like help me, doesn't mean that just because you don't go to the media with it or name his name that he's not going to kill, because he's got the attention that he wants, because he wants to think he's smarter than everybody else, especially the police and especially the detective investigating the murder. So no, I mean, it bolsters them, and then it becomes a game. Until that point in time, it's not a game. It's because they have a compunction to kill. Now, the guy who killed 5 or 6 kids in Michigan yesterday, he's a mass murderer. He's not a serial killer, because all the killings happened at one time. There was 3 or more killings that happened one time at the same place. A serial killer has 3 or more murders, similar methods of operation in the way the deaths are, But they can be anywhere in the country. I mean, he could kill one in New York, he could kill one in Indiana, and then go to California. He's still a serial murderer. So there's a difference. There's a spree killer. The guy who, I can't remember his name, but he put his stepson in the trunk of a car and
they drove around.
And they drove around.
Yes.
That's a spree killer.
Yeah. They just randomly chose people to shoot. And so for people to understand on that one, I believe that happened in Washington, D.C.
Virginia.
Or Virginia.
It happened in several states.
Yes. It happened in several places. And I watched a short series on what had happened. Basically, they took a car and they drilled out a hole in the back of the car and they laid down the bottom back seat, and then the son, pulled up his rifle and had it up to the edge. They'd drive around, and then he'd stop and park, and he'd fire and kill somebody, and then they'd drive off. And then the shell casing would be inside the vehicle with them. The sound would be muffled because of them being in the trunk, because I believe they soundproofed the trunk and the car, so that way you couldn't really tell. And but people were terrified.
Yes, absolutely.
And I don't remember what year it happened. I probably wasn't even born yet at that time.
Maybe.
But when you were talking about when you first started and stuff, and then you're talking about like back in the 70s and 80s, I hadn't even been born.
Oh shoot, I have guys whose grandkids are on the police department now that I used to work with.
It's pretty. That's gotta feel. That's gotta feel like you're just old. I couldn't do it. Well, just recently. Sorry, I talk about random stuff too. I have ADHD. I enjoy.
That's
it.
fine.
Just recently, it's the 20th year anniversary. Everybody of Harry Potter, the movie series.
Yeah.
The movie series. November 6th, 28th, I think. I don't know. Of 2001. And then upcoming in a couple days, I believe it's December 6th or 8th, is the 20th anniversary for Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship.
Oh man.
Do you like Lord of the Rings?
Yeah.
I love that movie. Oh my gosh. I was talking to the guys at work about it, and they think I'm a nerd for watching that stuff, but it's an incredible story. It's the film in it is amazing. The music is amazing. It got like 17 nominees for Emmys or Oscars or something. Academy Awards, yeah. It got like 17 of them. And it's absolutely incredible. It's way more than any other 3-part movie series ever got. So anyways, but back to serial killers. So you interviewed a serial killer.
I did.
From Indianapolis, but you interviewed him in Colorado.
St. Louis.
Right. Sorry about that. Do you still remember what it was like talking to him? Like the feelings that you had? Because I would probably be a little bit intimidated or just angry. I don't know what I would feel.
I was excited to talk to him. I mean, who gets to talk to a serial killer? I mean, and know it. And know you're talking to a serial killer. It's one thing to talk to somebody who ends up being a serial killer, but you don't know that at the time.
He ended up being a serial killer.
And you're lucky to be able to get away. So, yes, Vernon Brown. I'm going to look him up. In 1979, actually 1974, I believe it was, there was a 10-year-old girl whose body was found in a vacant house next to a church. And I wasn't on at that time, but the detectives come to find out through the investigation that was started by my partner into a connection between Vernon Brown and the murder of 2 other girls in St. Louis, with trying to tie it in with the young lady that was murdered here. When I talked to the detectives who initially investigated the murder, they swore that they believed it was a white guy that had killed her because he had raped another girl about a mile down the street, around 11th and 12th in College or something like that. And this was about 3 miles away. And they just thought they had figured it out and couldn't get enough evidence on him to make the arrest, but they closed the case. So we started going over this case again and looking at the case files, which is a very small case file. And I started interviewing everyone again, even the people that they thought did it. And after I'd spent some time doing the investigation, I woke up in the middle of the night saying it would have been impossible for this guy to kill her because he was at the drive-in movie at the time she was murdered. So starting from that, I went back and started reviewing everything I had done. And I told my partner about this. And come to find out, when we started checking the church, we wanted to see if there was any connection with Vernon to that church and the house. Well, his grandfather had been the preacher at that church. And his grandparents there were actually 3 houses there next to each other. They're all vacant at the time. But they all belonged to his grandparents. He had been arrested for child molest on a couple of previous occasions. He was a sex offender. They never did any investigation on him or found out who actually who owned that property that the girl's body was found in. At least not connecting it to Vernon Brown. Well, I was able to get the old Channel 6 news footage of the interviews and the crime scene when it happened. And lo and behold, who's in the crowd? Vernon Brown. And he always carried a bag of candy around so he could give candy to the kids, kind of prepping them and trying to find the right one. So he ended up moving out of town shortly after that. And we were able to track his movements for a few years all over the country until he ended up in St. Louis, and he killed 2 more girls. One he threw in a dumpster, the other one he cut off her head. And they were able to catch him. And so we went to St. Louis to talk to him. My partner, who was the veteran homicide detective, I probably only had maybe a couple of years on, if that. We drove up to St. Louis and spent the day getting everything ready so we could talk to him. And their criminal justice system is different in St. Louis because they were under French rule back in the beginning. And so that has kind of stayed with them in the criminal justice system. So as in Indianapolis, if I wanted to go talk to a suspect and they wanted to talk to me, I could just go up in the jail and bring them down and interview them. In St. Louis, you have to have a court order and the defense attorney has to be present no matter what. So my partner said, I want you to sit across the table from him. I'm going to sit at the end of the table and kind of next to him, and I'll get a little bit closer as the interview goes on. And he brought himself a Coke and some candy bars so he could just go and go and go if he had to. Well, after about an hour or two of Mike talking to Vernon, he reached over. During the time, he had gotten closer physically, closer and closer to him. And the closer he got, the more Vernon talked to me, was looking at me when he gave the answers. Mike touched him on the knee one time, and he wouldn't talk to the detective anymore. And he was looking at me. Vernon was looking at me, and Mike said, "You know what? I got to go to the restroom. Steve, you go ahead and talk to him." And we talked for another hour. And his attorney, who was sitting in the room probably 4 or 5 times, because Vernon wanted to talk about killing this girl. But his attorney kept telling Vernon, don't say anything. Don't go there. And if he said it once, he said it 4 times. And I could never get it out of him, but we had a good conversation, but we had a barrier between us, a physical barrier between us. He didn't have the narcissistic attitude of feeling great about himself and he's getting this attention. He wasn't like that. He was very quiet and introverted. And when somebody was talking to him about something that he could relate to, that's what he liked. And that's why we got along. And we were able to talk about all kinds of things, as long as his attorney didn't interrupt. Mm-hmm. But we got back, and prosecutors here said, well, let's just wait to see what they do in St. Louis before we try to get him back here. Because we knew he did it. We had all the evidence we needed. I even had a witness who said, oh, yeah, I saw Vernon with her the day she was murdered. So where did you see him? Said they were in his car. She was sitting on his lap, and it was a Sunday afternoon, and she was driving the car sitting on his lap. I said, well, that's not anywhere in the files that I see. Did you tell the detective that? No. Why? They didn't ask. So, but Vernon was a black guy, and it was a black neighborhood. And I couldn't for the life of me justify in my mind why would this other guy go into a black neighborhood, snatch a little black girl, and he's white, and think that he could get away with that without somebody saying something. I don't think he could have. My intuition, it wasn't because I knew more than anybody else. I just had this gut feeling that this wouldn't happen. Or if it happens so rarely. And it didn't happen that way. It was a neighborhood guy that did this, which I thought it was all along. But anyway, he was convicted of the murders and given the death penalty in St. Louis.
And I saw that in here. I was looking up serial killers, September 27th, 2015. Does that sound about right?
Is that when he got the death penalty? Is that when he was executed?
Born, blah, blah, blah. Let's see what date he was executed. I thought I read that it was 2005, yes. He was executed by lethal injection in Missouri on May 17th, 2005. The article was 2017. Two or more murders.
Yeah.
2 more murders have subsequently been leaked to him and remains a suspect in 20 more. 20 more murders.
Yeah. There was no doubt.
I'll
there
post
was
the
no
picture
doubt
up
that
there
he
on
had
this.
done several.
Yeah. No, I'll post it in here afterwards. So
okay.
I do everything in post-production. That's why,
there you
why
go.
It sucks. It is hard because I got to get something live. But actually, now I couldn't have. Never mind. I was going to say I could do a screen record on the computer, but I don't believe that I'd be able to connect that in. It'd be too hard to do that anyways. Forget it. I'll just put it in afterwards.
You just do a professional job of putting it in afterwards.
Yeah, I'll do a good job doing that. So, and with talking to a serial killer, did you ever think, man, this dude, just a normal guy, just had a rough upbringing. He's just had, he was poor, and maybe he lived in a low class neighborhood. He didn't have much going on in his life, didn't have a great job, and it resulted to him becoming a serial killer. Did you ever think that kind of stuff, or
no?
Because it. In my mind, from what I've always seen in the movies and TV shows, it's always those types of people that don't have much going on in their life. Now, like in the movie American Psycho with Christian Bale, the movie's fantastic, by the way.
Yes.
But he is a very high performance, high functioning, adult male, alpha male who's in the world of Wall Street, and he's killing prostitutes and recording himself and then chopping people up. And now, I don't ever hear of anything like that going on. What did you normally see?
Well, when I was talking to Vernon, he was quiet. Mm-hmm. He was reserved. He wasn't smart. How he got away with these murders was just luck. Plus the fact that he'd move around a lot. So he wasn't around when they were probably doing all the investigating, just like he wasn't around when I was doing the investigating, when my partner and I were doing the investigating. So he just come and go throughout the country. I'm not sure exactly what happened, how they caught him in St. Louis. Must have been some good police work. But the way he did things, and he kept getting away with it. And so he kept doing it because he's the kind of guy who had compulsion. I never in talking to him, thought of him as a normal guy. I would never say that. He's the only one I've ever talked to, but when you see him talking to him on the documentaries on TV and stuff that we've talked about, these serial killers, now I don't care whether they're the kind who enjoy getting it out and talking about it, or the guys like Vernon who were really quiet and reserved. None of them led normal lives. I mean, what's the name of the guy who was killed in prison? He was killing all the kids that came to his house.
Oh.
All the gay kids coming to his house.
The guy that dressed up as a clown?
No. The guy that would put their heads in the refrigerator.
Oh, no. I'll look that up. I'll look that up.
But he was killed in prison. None of these guys led normal lives when they were growing up. They all had issues. I don't think that you can get triggered just one day out of this blue
was
sky.
it Dahmer?
Dahmer, Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yeah, Jeffrey Dahmer. Yeah. Jeffy Dahmer.
So he got what he deserved in
He
jail.
did.
At least according to prisoners.
Yeah. I did my first tour in a jail. It was Johns County Jail. I went there. It was when actually I was a cadet. It was so long ago. My wife will get so mad at me if I don't pull my shirt down. She's like, "You need to pull your shirt down." What are you talking about, honey? Well, it's punched up in the back. It looks bad. All right. I went to Johns County Sheriff's Department and we did a tour. This was probably 2011, 2010, 2011. And they said, all right, now I'll use a term that's not really used as much anymore. So YouTube, don't take it off. Or if you get offended, just turn this off because I don't care. They said, all right, all general pops in here. Chomos and pedos are in here. I'm like, what? Why are they separate? Like, why are they separate? And they said, oh, because general pop will kill these guys. And I said, sounds like the problem's taking care of itself, man. Like, he goes, no, we have to still protect these guys. And I'm like, wow. Like, and I never thought to think of it like that, but looking in there, seeing those pedos, seeing those child molesters in there, I'm like, they're not getting their punishment because these other dudes that, you know, whatever they have done, you know, burglaries, carjacking, simple stuff, I don't know what else they would have done. It wasn't like they might have had one or two guys maybe in there. I don't know what they would keep in the jail system until before they go to the prison, but they're protecting them from the general pop guys.
Right.
And that's what blew my mind. I'm like, and that's when I learned that, even prisoners, guys in jail, they have a certain code of ethics that you'd got to follow.
Yep.
And I remember talking to one of the guys who was in there because you can go and talk to him. And I said something about, can you believe this crap about how you can't even be in the same room as these, chomos and pedos? And he said, man, you just don't mess with kids. And I'm like, man, that's insane. Like, it's cool to hear that they had such a high regard on that. But I was like, well, what are you in here for? And he's like, I stabbed a guy. And I'm like, oh, you just don't stab people, man. Oh my gosh, that guy was a kid at some point.
Well, just think, when a teenager, 15, 16 years old in the past, was convicted of a violent crime, a murder, or gang-related murder, where do you think they go when they get convicted? They don't go to juvie.
No, it wouldn't be juvie. It'd be
they go to the
prison.
Indiana State Reformatory, and they have a particular area for underage kids.
Wow.
At least they did. I don't know what they're doing now, but
Have you ever had any when you were in the jail, not as an inmate, as a worker, did you have any kids that were in there that had committed a murder? At that time?
Yeah, and we would separate them from the rest of the population because they didn't stay in the arresting processing center very long. Because it wasn't the Marion County Jail, we'd ship them over to the Marion County Jail, and they also had a separate area for people under 18.
Wow. What was that like looking at? Like, because in my mind, whenever I got watched it on TV or something, and like I'd see like a 12-year-old who killed his grandma because, you know, she wouldn't let him play Fortnite or whatever.
Yeah.
And, you know, let your boys play Fortnite because I love playing Fortnite, you know, because my wife tells me I can't play sometimes, and I have that understanding. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. It's a joke.
Happy wife, happy life.
Yes. Yes. But I'd watch the TV and I'm like, what is that? What was going through his mind? Like if I saw that kid in person, what would be my thoughts? So with saying that, what were some of your thoughts when you would see those kids that were in the system? I can't say the system, in the jail system for being punished for their crimes of them killing somebody. What would go through your mind?
Well, first you see them in a cell, and they were all glass. And they look so little, you know, so young. And they normally sit in the back of the cell with the walls on either side of them. Or they'd be trying to sleep on the slab or their little bed. And we never had many prisoners that would bother them. You know, it just didn't happen very rarely. If it did, then we'd be on them. But they couldn't get to them anyway because we closed the doors. And then you could see, no matter how they were when they initially came in to the jail, the processing center, within an hour after being put in their cell, you can tell the fear that has creeped in and how scared they really are. And now they're starting to get the idea of the depth of what they've done. And it's hitting them. And they just get smaller and smaller. It's just such a weird thing to see it.
I would feel way too bad. Like I would start to like, hey man, how's it going, buddy? Like trying to cheer him up. Like, hey, you want to hear a joke? What's your favorite candy? Like, you know, not the candy man from, you know, Vernon. I'm not like that. But I'd be more like, dude, I want to cheer you up, man. Like, I know you did a horrible crime, like horrible, but you're just, because I see that, I think of that, and I think of my nephews. I think of, you know, kids that I see in the neighborhood. I'm like a 14-year-old. I'm like, man, there's kids that have killed other people and they're in jail.
But don't you think that they deserve that time while they're there? Because it's a temporary situation anyway before they go to the jail or end up in prison somewhere. Let them feel all of those feelings without somebody trying to make them feel better about themselves. Let them feel what they're feeling, the depth of it, and what they've done and how many people it has affected and how it's going to affect their lives for years to come. Don't you think that they deserve to have that? Because down the road, they're going to get the psychological counseling. They're going to get the social counseling. And, you know, they'll have time to get their lives back in line if they want to at some point. But initially, let them feel the full brunt of what they've done and let them take responsibility for what they've done without trying to lift their spirits up because they're in jail because they killed their grandma.
I think they deserve it. I think they deserve it, but I would see the innocence in my mind, and I'd say, man, just one bad decision. And I see that with even older people. Can you pull your mic down just a little bit? Pull it out just a tiny bit, and then aim it. There you go, right there. Perfect. It's
like that? Is that good?
Yeah, it's perfect. But I even see it with most people that, like when they're getting charged for their crimes by the judge, or the jury's reading their sentence, or reading what they've found them guilty of. And you just see like, man, like this guy's just made poor choices in his life. And I always wish people wouldn't do that stuff. You know, obviously I wish no one, you know, I wish there wasn't any crimes that happened because I want what's best for everybody. But I would sit there and watch them, you know, I'd see the serial killers, the ones that like the pedos and the chomos and the serial killers, when they get their punishment, I love watching them cry because it's like, dude, you're going to rot, hopefully for a short time in prison, and then they take you to your execution. because I don't like the whole letting them sit in the system for 30, 40 years on death row and then they're killed. Let's make it quick. But the people that have just made poor choices in their lives, that's what kind of like, man, like you had the choice to be a better person and you didn't do that. Now you have to suffer your consequences. So with talking about that real quick, I've had these discussions with other people before. The prison system. There's prison systems in the world that, all the way from the extreme reformity of Norway's prisons, where it's like a hotel. They give you cable TV. You have your key to your own cell. You can go outside. You can go walk out, but you just got to come back. You have anything and everything you want. And then we have jails that are here, which I still think our jails here are way better than most of the other countries out there in the world, because I've watched documentaries on like jails in Africa, jails in Liberia, jails in there's jails in Asia that are completely disgusting and horrible. There's jails that are in other countries that are ran by the prisoners that are in there. They run that. And but what's your opinion on the reformity or disciplinary actions for the punishment of your crime?
You know, the United States has gone through many, many different phases of corrections, where they tried to get everybody to believe in Jesus at one time, where it was punishment phase, where you get punished severely, trying to be, and it just kind of goes back between those constantly and consistently. What I think of the present correction system, I think that it could be improved greatly. I don't think it's as much as you want to think that these people that go into prison that are just scumbags, that if they happen to get sexually assaulted in the jail, that it's just what they deserve. Well, we have to live with them when they come out of prison. Do we really want that to happen? If your son makes a mistake and kills somebody drunk driving and has to go to prison, or your daughter, you want them to experience that? I would say no. And you can't say, well, they're not as bad as a kid who kills his mom. Well, yes, he is. He killed somebody, or she killed somebody. So I don't believe, and I do believe that they could stop the sexual assaults and stop allowing gang members to congregate all together and create far more problems than social justice needs that are being met for their own kind, I guess, because you're creating serious problem. I mean, serious divisions. When you create, the United States now is just like a big prison because we're so divided. And what has that made us do? Dislike each other for different reasons. In prison, you have the smaller version of it with all kinds of gangs, Mexican gangs, black mafia, Muslim gangs, white extremist gangs. And so that creates such dissension in the jail. They're going to take it out by doing the worst thing they can possibly do is to you. And everybody's scared to death when they go to prison of being raped in prison. It shouldn't happen. That's my feeling. I don't care how bad you are. It shouldn't happen because it's going to make you worse. Mm-hmm. And now I got to live with you in my neighborhood when you get out. Just like child molesters. People that get out of prison and come out are sex offenders. Just look at the data on the computer about how many sex offenders live in this neighborhood.
Oh, yeah.
Then you'll see. Do you want these people abused so badly in prison that they hate everybody when they come out? Or give them an opportunity to try and change and help to influence that change for the better, because we're a worse country. I'm not saying that people shouldn't go to jail and spend time in prison. I'm not for that. You got to pay the price. But the conditions in prison.
I do have a couple things on that. One, if I were to ever go to prison, no bar soap, only gel soap.
Yes.
Because that ain't going to slip through my hand. If it do, it's gone. Oops. I'll get another one. There it is. It's on my hands. Please, no bar soap. 2, we had a neighbor, and I don't think he'll mind if I use his name. His name was Mike Main. And the guy he is intense. I really love Mike. He's such a great guy. But whenever we would have a sexual offender or a what was the other name you used for it again? I just forgot.
Child molester,
sexual offender,
pedophilia.
Yeah, they would move into the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. He would print it up because he would get on the Watchdog app. He would print it all up, and every single house in the neighborhood, including his, would get a picture with tape up on their window of who the person was, what address they lived at, and what they did. And if they had children there, he made sure that he sat there and talked to them and showed them the picture. This guy living in our neighborhood right now. And I remember seeing that growing up. I'd see him walking around with, stacks full of papers, and he'd just walk around and just go up and post it right up there. And I was sitting there, I'm like, man, that guy's, he's kind of a jerk. I'm like, this guy's trying to live his best life now and all that. And after the first occurrence of the person who I could point to the house right now, it's not in this neighborhood. I've already checked to this neighborhood. This neighborhood's clear. We're good. The neighborhood over, there's 2. So just saying, folks. Second Amendment always works. But at that time, I was young enough. I was like, man, Mike's a jerk for doing that.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
But then a few years later, that guy had a slip up. That sex offender had a slip up, got arrested. He did that act again. I don't know how specifically what happened, but I know that I talked to one of the officers and he said that he's being arrested for child something. I don't know if it's seduction, pornography, or, molestation, but I was like, wow. And then after that, ever since then, I've had respect for the people that walk around and do that. Hey, be aware. This is what's going on.
Bear this in mind, that as much as a person likes a person of the opposite sex, for us, we like women. We love women. Mm-hmm. That's innate to us. It's built in. A child molester, a pedophile, they're built in. It would be as hard for us to change them as it would be for them to change us. You have to remember that. That's as close to them as the opposite sex is for us. So, are they going to change? No, probably not. Will they reoffend? Chances are really high that they will. So, yeah, I mean, there's nothing illegal about what this guy was doing. Mm-hmm. Are they going to fall off the wagon again? Bear this in mind, that a child molester will have, I'm not even going to say a number, but I will tell you it's high, numerous incidents before they're ever caught.
That reminds me of a couple things, actually. One, with the numerous instances, being that doctor that was doing the physicals for all the Olympic athletes, the female athletes.
Yep.
Nazar something.
Yes.
As an Indian name, I believe. Those high-level Olympic athletes for years and years and years and years were being molested by this doctor.
Yep.
And things didn't go on. The committee there let it happen for a while, and then finally they had enough, I guess, evidence to go against it, and they spoke out, which was great. Another thing is what activists are calling pedophiles now. Have you heard this yet?
Mm-mm.
They're calling them MAPs. Minor attracted people.
Oh, yes, I've heard that.
So this is advocate groups for people who are minor attracted people, a.k.a. pedophiles. And there's people in certain political functions that are supporting this. I can bet you money you know which side is more supportive of this. It's not the one with the American flag behind it, but it's it's sides that are saying, hey, these people just have problems, but we can't stigmatize the name child molester or pedophile because that offends them. And if we want them to get some help, we have to change the name of what they're being called so that way they don't feel bad about it. How disgusting is that?
Well, it's disgusting because, again, I go back to the example. We like who we like. They like their choices. They're not going to change. You're not going to make a homosexual a straight person. And generally, you're not going to make a straight person into a homosexual. You're not going to make a pedophile into someone who loves an adult, because their choice is wired in their brain that they like young kids. That's not going to change. And the data shows that. So how their reoffending rate is low compared to normal criminals that get out. I know it's been said that it's higher. Well, it's not, because they can have several instances of molestation going on before they're ever caught, because of the stigma that's attached to the kids and the kids' family.
It's just something to me that, do you remember I believe it was the karate instructor or Boy Scout leader.
The dad?
The dad went.
And the karate instructor was molesting the boy.
Yes. And the dad showed up and he was by the payphones. It's on YouTube.
Yes.
Above the age of 18, you can watch this. You have to click confirm for, terrifying images, but you could type it in. Dad kills son's rapist.
Yeah, I saw that the day it happened.
Did you really?
Yeah, it was
you
on
saw
TV.
it live on TV? It was live on TV. It played. It aired.
Yeah.
It did. It's still on YouTube. You can still watch it.
Yeah.
If you're under the age of 18, do not watch it. But if you're above the age of 18, you feel like you can sit there and watch that. The guy got justice served right then and there. You hear the father say something real quick. Oh, hey, he's coming. And then, so basically what happened was the karate instructor was molesting this guy's son. And I don't know if it went on for a super long time, but he was being convicted. It was right when he was being taken from the courthouse to go to jail, or it was from the jail to the courthouse. He was being walked in, had his hands, handcuffed. The father's at the payphones, sets the payphone down, turns around and pop right in the side of the head.
Yeah.
I believe it went either right here or up here. I can't remember. But the dude just drops, and the father gets tackled, and then you hear the cop saying his name, like, no, don't do it. It's like, oh my gosh. I'm trying to sit there, and I watched the video so many times, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, what would I be thinking if I was that father? What kind of rage would I have?
Yeah.
What would I want? Sorry, my shirt again.
Crying out loud.
Hey, I got to make my wife happy, if I want her to stay with me. But what would I be going through in my head if I had a son and he was raped, or a daughter? God forbid I have, any children that were raped. I hate when I hear something like that.
Yeah.
It blows my mind. It makes me sick to my stomach. I want to throw up thinking about it. But if I have a child that gets raped, what would I truly do? What would I do? Would I go to try to kill the offender? Would it be offender? Yeah, it'd be offender, right? Would I go to try to kill the offender? Would I seek the peace route? I've seen on YouTube, I was doing a bunch of research on, court cases and stuff like that the past few days, trying to get it in the mindset of what I would be thinking with talking with you. And I watched some cases. I can't remember the specific case it was, but the father came up and his daughter was raped and murdered, and he forgave his daughter's killer and rapist. And obviously there's a man of God, and I don't know if you'd see that really in any other religion, but he had obvious strong faith with God, and showed compassion and mercy to this guy.
Actually, I have seen that in the Muslim and the Jewish religion.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah,
I just haven't seen it because it's not very publicized.
Yeah, but remember this: when they say they forgive, that doesn't mean they forget.
Correct.
It doesn't mean that they don't have hard feelings. It doesn't mean that I want to be your friend. They just forgive so that person doesn't have control of their lives anymore. But let me ask you this: How many times can you be led by your emotions
Oh, a lot.
and it work out right?
Never.
Yeah, I mean, the initial thought is that.
I wouldn't say never. I would say a high percentage of the time it ain't going to
Yeah.
work out for me.
Let me give you an example of that. You know, everybody talks about, oh man, if I had a guy who molested a child, if I were going to interview him, I just want to beat him up. Well, I guess I used to think that way, but there's a different method, different tactic for questioning and interviewing a child molest suspect, because you can't be mean and horrible to them. They'll never tell you anything. That's been my experience. But if you are sympathetic to them and you get them to talking, they'll start crying and tell you everything. That's what I found in my experience.
What would you talk about with being sympathetic?
Well, let me give you an example.
Yeah.
I went, when I was in sex crimes, I went on a run, and a woman said that her husband had molested her daughter, who was like 4 years old, 3 or 4 years old.
Disgusting.
And she was totally coherent. She could speak. And we talked to her. She told us what happened, that he made her put, after he got out of the shower, made her put her mouth on his sexual organ, his penis. So I questioned him, and he said, and this is at his house, so there's no in-depth questioning. He said, well, I just got out of the shower. I came and sat on the bed, and the towel fell open, and as I was sitting on the bed, she was excited. She was coming over here to sit on my lap, and all of a sudden she tripped and fell, and my penis landed in her mouth. And I said, well, yeah, but that doesn't explain the pin that she said you used on her anus. Well, I don't know anything about that. So I get him up to the question room the next day after he's been arrested. And I'm talking to him, and I say, look, I know that you said she fell, and she just fell on your penis and it went in her mouth. Okay, I get it. But what I need you to do is explain the pin and be as sympathetic about it as possible. I mean, you know, kids, they're walking around in their underwear all the time. And he had said that. She was just in her underwear. And I said, did you feel tempted by her? Oh yeah, I was really tempted. She's just doing that to tempt me. She's 4 years old. Crying out loud. She's 4 years old. You can't do that.
Yeah.
Get him to confess. He's crying by the end of his confession. And man, we smacked him down in court because he gave a statement, but I was being sympathetic to him. And that's what I meant by that.
That, to me, I just never been put in that situation. So I couldn't tell you what I would do. I would like to say the very alpha male, like, no, I'd beat the crap out of that guy. Yeah. I'd like to say that, but I don't know. I don't know what my mind would tell me what to do. I don't know what would be put in front of me and what I would say. I would be asking a lot of questions and tell me what happened. You know, start from the beginning. Let's go to the end.
Yeah.
And I really don't know. Maybe I need to schedule an interview with a serial killer or someone stupid like that.
Oh gosh, I think that would be fantastic.
I think that would be so cool to talk with someone, like sit down and talk with someone who, you know, obviously I'd have to be in the position where I could defend myself if something were to go down.
Well, you would be
coming here.
Yeah.
But it would be very interesting for me to sit there and have a conversation with somebody that has done something like that, that's willing to talk.
Yeah.
And to try to get my mind wrapped around it, because I don't want to sit there and understand why. Tell me why you did it, because I want to be on the same level. I will never be. I would never be.
That's just dumb.
I want to know what my emotions are going to be after listening to you spit your crap, you know, after you tell me why she tripped and fell and it just went right. Come on, bro. Like, that would be my response back. Like, come on, bud. I mean, I wish I could say that to every other person that's even mad at me. I'm like, they tripped and fell right into my fist 14 times. And yeah, their tooth's in my knuckle, but he tripped. Like,
Well, let's go back to what this person was saying when they call them maps.
Yes.
Because that is assuming that the children that they molest are not going to have lots of problems when they grow up. Mm-hmm. So they're assuming something that is not in evidence. In fact, they're assuming something that is in evidence, that it does create problems in teenage years and adult years. So for anyone to say that about these pedophiles and child molesters, I would tell them to their face, you're ignorant. Mm-hmm. Because you have no basis to say that. Because the children are not willing participants at all, ever. Because they can't make those kind of decisions. Their brain is not to the place where they can make those decisions. Normal brains stop that kind of development and start thinking more like adults around 25 years old. Mm-hmm. Up until that point in time, their brain's still growing. And they're still going through a lot of turmoil and trauma with their brain and what to think about things.
There's something that I would like to state on this portion. There were 7 college professors in the UK that openly came out in support of pedophilia. And they said, hey, children as young as 5 should be able to determine whether they want to have sex or not. Now, you can go and look this up. I believe there were 7 of them, and I know it was in the UK. This happened back in the 70s, I believe. They were talking about this. Now, I'm a conspiracy theorist. I enjoy listening. I enjoy listening to things and be like, man, that's crazy if that's true. An idea that has been floating around, a theory that's been floating around is, now that children in some countries have the right to say, if they're a boy, they say, I'm a girl. I want to be a girl. Then the doctors are led to say, okay, if you feel like you're a girl, we'll go ahead and do hormone suppressants.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a famous case in Canada where it was a divorced mother and father. The mother talked the son into believing that he was a girl. The son, came back to the father's house dressed up as a girl, and he goes, what are you doing? You're not a girl. You're a boy. And then he put on boy clothes. He told him, I do feel like I am a boy, but mommy's making me do this. And this ended up being a huge, drawn-out case. You can look it up. I highly suggest you look it up. The mother won in the courts, and she had custody of the child. And the father was, I don't believe he was arrested, but he had to pay a huge fine. I believe, that's what I think that happened. I'm trying to remember this. This happened 2 years ago. I'm trying to remember that this happened. But there are plenty of cases now where they're trying to make it, like get CPS involved and charge parents with neglect if a child comes out and says, I'm a girl when they're a boy, or if they say, I am a boy when they're a girl, and the parents ignore it or say we don't know what is going on, something's going on. There are certain groups that are out there trying to get these kids to believe that they're other sexes, and then they're financially backing them, and medical doctors that have to go along with it. If not, they will be disbarred, I believe it's called, when they lose their
law license,
their license for their doctorate. So disbanded of their degree or their bars. I don't know what it is, but there are groups out there, and they are funded by a certain group. It's very obvious on which side is really for this or not. But people still support that group, and then they still have that power to do what they'd like to do. Now, it's coming here to the United States. It's already been going on. There's court cases right now where children are filing court cases against their parents for neglect because they say, well, I'm a boy, when they have a set of breasts and a vagina and all the hormones on the inside and the genome of a female. And they're going against their parents as a neglect case for not letting them get hormone replacement or it wouldn't be hormone replacement therapy for most, but for some, they would just take hormone suppressants. And that is just shown to it's proven to show that they have much worse reactions or much worse, what is it called? Later on down in their life, they can't even have, they wouldn't be able to have a child. They would be, what is it when you can't have kids at all? Your sperm is deceased, basically. I am such a moron.
Infertile.
It is proven to show that you would be more infertile. But people that want to make those choices to say if they're above the the proper age of 18 and making your own decisions, I think it's a poor decision to make, especially if you're going to be chopping things off, because you have to understand if you're going to be chopping something off that it is considered at that point an open wound. If they flipped it inside out, that you have to keep open. You need to research that if you don't know. And they're trying to get it to where children can make these decisions. But what I was getting to with that, these professors were talking about if children can make their decisions on that at the age of 5. With that being said, I am not supporting any decision. I am not stating that it is okay to do that. I think it's very wrong to do it. But if we're letting kids make the decision of what sex they're going to be, what is that going to do later on down the road? My mind plays the game of, if you're going to let them make the decision of, well, I'm a girl and they're a boy, and I'm a little girl though, but that's what I believe. And then they can have the replacement therapy to become more of a female. Years down the road, what's going to happen next?
Mm-hmm.
I just want to have sex, and I don't care what age they are. I just want to have sex. I'm a girl and I'm a boy and I want to have. If we're going to do this now, what's going to happen later on down the road? Earlier, you discussed that you could not have sex toys openly shared in porno stores back in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
So now you go into a porn store or a sex shop.
Any place now.
Any place. What do you see? Sex toys everywhere out in the open. Things that are like they're just doing all sorts of stuff. They're just sitting there, like just looking at it.
Yeah.
That's stigmatization.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to keep showing that over and over and over again, what's going to keep happening? It's going to keep growing. It's going to keep getting bigger. It's going to get more in depth. It's going to get into crazier crap. If we're doing this now with kids and we're letting it happen, we shouldn't let it happen. If we're letting it happen 5, 10, 15 years down the road, what's going to happen? Where are we going to be at? Are there going to be laws placed that state, because in Canada, there's laws protecting children that believe they're females, or boys that think they're girls and girls that think they're boys. In other countries, they're doing that.
Well, I think it's going to be interesting to see down the road.
Sorry about my rant. I didn't mean to go that
That's
long.
okay. But it's going to be interesting to see down the road of the countries who do allow this to follow these children and to see how they grow and mature and see what kind of life they have. My understanding is there's quite a few suicides in this type of a group.
Yes, the suicide rate, real quick, if you don't mind. I'm trying to go off of memory. The suicide rate actually has a 1% to 2% change from before and after surgery, or the change. So I believe it was either 60% suicide rate for those who believe that they are another sex. I believe it was 60%. It could be 40%. It's either, I'm pretty sure it's 60. Let's say like 63. And then after surgery, it was, I believe, 61. But the percentage wise, before and after, very similar of the suicide rate. So, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, that's okay. And a lot of that.
I'll double check that. Well,
yeah, the data will make a difference too on the age of the people that the ages of the people that they looked at, the sex of the ages, the sex of the people they looked at, and their childhood, and when it happened. These are all things that should be incorporated in any kind of method of collecting data to make any kind of a halfway truthful reason. And I don't mean truthful, I mean accurate. Because it's such a new thing that we just don't know. I'd like to see them follow these kids on the path that they've taken to adulthood and see how it's affected them, either good or bad.
That's one of the quickest articles that I could pull up and find is by the NCBI, an Indian Journal of Psychological Medicine. This is just one of them. This was also in 2016, so it's not as updated, but it's from 32% to 50% across countries for the suicide attempt rate. But that was
For
also,
those who had the surgery?
this was those before.
Okay.
This was before, but this is also, it also shows of them at least having attempted suicide at least once before their 20th birthday. But this is also a very old article. I'd have to keep researching. This is what would be nice if I had another person here to do all these researches. But that was an old article. There's reasons why they don't. There's reasons why that there's certain articles that aren't brought. If you search on Google, you'll find different things versus like DuckDuckGo. On DuckDuckGo, you can search up the exact same thing, and you'll have legit articles pulled up that wouldn't be in certain favors of certain political parties. So I was using Google there, but that was an older article at 32 to 50%. Still extremely high. Still extremely high. There was a recent article that I read that was done 2 years ago that said, I'm pretty sure up to 60%. And then the percentage before and after were like 1 to 2% difference before and after the sex change.
Yeah. Not a big difference, is it?
It's not much of a difference at all. Even if it was a 10% difference, I don't believe that's not much of a difference at all. So at what point, you could say that's because of bullying. No, because kids are, I think bullying being rooted out of today's classrooms, today's schools. I was bullied in school, and look where it turned out for me. Look how I turned out. It actually sharpened me and made me want to grow some muscle and not let it happen again.
Yeah.
My dad got me and my brother into boxing. He got us into self-defense, so we learned how to fight properly. Not properly, but boxing, really helps you with taking hits, and then you can hit back. We got put into self-defense classes that really helped out, but being bullied really pushed us to becoming more of a man. And I think that's a big issue going on in today's world. I actually had this discussion with one of my boss, my captain, and his name's Chris. I won't share his last name because I don't know if he'd want me to share it at all, but well, I just kind of ruined it. Sorry. But we just had this discussion, and he brought up a very good point. This comes down with how people are acting today. It comes down to one of the portions is a participation trophy. Everyone gets a trophy. Everybody gets something. Everybody's deserved something. And I sat there, I was like, yes and no, because I was the participation trophy kid because I was never really great at things, but it was cool to get a trophy. But now that I think and look back on it, I'm like, I wasn't a winner. I shouldn't be getting a participation trophy just for participating. Yeah. It should be hey, better luck next year, bud.
We didn't have anything like that when I was growing up. You either could do it or you couldn't do it. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't a loser and a winner necessarily. Yes, somebody did win, but that should be motivation to you to be better. Now, as far as bullying goes, it really depends on the bullying, the type of bullying.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Today's bullying is absolutely horrible because you get no respite from the bullying because of social media. Mm-hmm. And that makes it so bad. And it should just not get away from it because it's not just one person. It's several people that can get involved in it who don't even know you. Mm-hmm. And so that makes it really, really bad.
It does make it difficult. But then if we're going to talk, if we talk about social media, then there's a huge issue right there. If we're going to go ahead and say, because you can go on Facebook right now and see hate speech as one of their rules and guidelines of engagement. That's a pretty bad thing. The reason being is if I post this video and people hate it, they can talk all the trash they want. I believe that they should be able to say almost really about whatever they want.
Right.
Because for one, they have that freedom to. I am not a free speech absolutist because there's obvious things that you really shouldn't say. It's the obvious, fire in a crowded theater, causing mayhem and panic. I don't believe that should be done for no unknown reason unless there actually is a fire in the theater or there's reason to be caused that. But if you start having the whole hate speech to where you're going to be silencing speech that is hateful, I believe that is wrong. let the person have their own egg on their face for stating things like that, because it makes them look bad in the long run. Yeah, it sucks now that, I made let's use this as an example. I made a bad comment and people are now upset with me for saying something that was bullying somebody that has either a condition or they're self-conscious of, and now I've been the bully. And then now it's like, wow, I shouldn't have said that. Or you just keep saying the stupid crap that you do say and you just move on with your life.
Yeah.
Now, I don't believe that it should, hey, intentionally go and do it. No, but I'm not going to sit there and tell somebody that they can't say it. I'll tell them, dude, you shouldn't have said that. But I'm not going to stop you because I can't. I'm not going to sit here and censor you. But there are companies out there that do that, that do censor. I have been censored, multiple times. It sucks. But I do agree. Yes, bullying, it's different. When I got bullied, I got put in headlocks and, punched in the stomach and pushed around and made fun of for being, overweight and having a big nose and big teeth and, that kind of stuff.
Well, I wasn't going to say anything about that.
No, I know. I do, man. I have a big schnoz. This thing, if you can get a good side profile of that. And also now my head's grown. My head has grown a bit in size, and I have also grown a little bit in size as well. But at the time, my nose was ginormous, and my teeth were like big beaver teeth, and it was just huge. And I got made fun of for it all the time, but it shaped me to being a stronger person. I can sit there now, and I can take a lot of abuse, verbal abuse from people, and it's just like, whatever, dude. I don't care, because I heard it growing up from other kids. And then going into the gym, finding something to focus on, going to the gym, working out, hitting that. I gotta fix my shirt again.
Yeah,
hitting that set. Just the other day I was in there and I was like, I'm gonna hit this for 5. And I'm on bench and I'm like, 1, 2, 3. I hit it for 5. I'm like, yeah, I feel good. Focusing on something, training, and making yourself better. That's something to me that I think, hey, if you're getting bullied, that's why I agree with in the old school days, I've always heard about, at my old school at Greenwood, if 2 kids were in a little tiff, the principal was like, all right, here's a set of boxing gloves, and you 2 are going to settle this out in the basement there. And they had a little tiny basement. They'd take them down there. They had a ring, and they'd let the 2 students, duke it out.
I like the idea.
That's a great idea. You're in a controlled environment to where you have a referee, and they, ding, 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 get out all your anger. You're wearing gloves. You'll still bleed a bit. You might break your nose or something, but you're duking it out. And then by the time it was done, I spoke with one of the teachers there, is named Mr. Mullen, and he was there at that time when that would happen. And I said, what was that like? He said, it was great, because you didn't have fights going on in the hallways. You had them going on just in that one spot.
Yeah.
2 students, they start a fight, they go finish it down there, and then they're done. They're buddies afterwards. I couldn't tell you how many times I fought a couple of my friends, and then right afterwards we're best buds again. Yeah. And that's missing today, because people are soft. Kids are soft. And
this is soft.
Yes. Oh, the brain.
The brain is soft.
And it just...
Everybody wants to be a victim.
Yes.
At least that's their defense. Well, the reason I'm like this is because of this. Cause and effect. Victimization. Well, it's too bad you can't get over that. It's just too bad.
And there's certain things to be a victim of.
Exactly right. But I'm just talking about normal, everyday things.
Yes.
That you have to learn to live with, because life is not easy.
No.
And it doesn't get easier. Kids, I hate to tell you this, but life does not get easier.
It does not. So speaking of victims, and speaking of, while we were on the topic of child molesters, you were speaking about with the pedophiles and what it can do to a child when they grow up. Now, with that child being sexually assaulted, abused, or raped, what were some things that you noticed, in the jail system? Because I can't remember the percentage, but there is a significant percentage of people or young men or men who were sexually abused or assaulted or raped that ended up going into the system and also becoming either molesters or assaulters. Assaulters.
Yeah. Well, 2 things. Number one is those that were molested have a greater chance to becoming the predators. And two is that it makes them so angry either at themselves that they allowed it to happen, or at somebody else because they allowed it to happen to you as a child. Now, a big answer to that is to commit suicide for these people. And that's no good. They haven't developed the wherewithal. They haven't had the counseling. They haven't had the advisement of how to protect yourself, of how to deal with it. And I'm not saying get over it. I'm saying to deal with it, to put it into play, that you can use it to get stronger and to help other people. Look at the Me Too movement. All of these actresses that were literally molested by casting directors, other actors, whatnot. Look how much it affects them, and everybody is very sensitive to how that has affected them. Don't you think that a child that was molested is going to be far more affected for far longer than the adults who were molested when they were teenagers? Of course they will be. And so if it's not good for the adults, what makes the people who thinks that these pedophiles, that it's okay for them to pick a 5-year-old to be a lover and that it won't affect the 5-year-old or the 8-year-old or the 10-year-old? That's crazy. That doesn't even make sense, does it?
No.
I mean, if an adult is affected by it, how much more will a child be affected by it? That's just like saying a child, my kids aren't affected by divorce. Well, I've been divorced. I would like to say that about kids, that they're not affected by divorce, but they are. There's no getting around it. They are. And if these kids are molested when they're young and made as toys or an agenda for adults, they're going to suffer the consequences the rest of their lives. And to say that any adult should be able to help the child make the decision to be lovers is absolutely outstands me. I don't know what kind of mindset that could come up with that. I don't care if child molesters are offended. They should be offended. They should be guilty, feel guilty about it. One of the first big associations in America was called the Man-Boy Love Association. And that was a big deal back in the 70s and 80s. I don't know if they are still or not, or how big the organization is. It could be huge. They were pretty much underground. We kept track of them in Vice because I was dealing with that. And just to hear what they say and the pictures they'd post on wasn't even the web back then. It was just getting together and exchanging pictures. Now, underground child pornography is just unbelievable. Where do you think a lot of these missing children, and there's thousands of
Hundreds of thousands,
and gone missing for good, where do you think they are? Having tea and crumpets at Ellis Ayres Tea House? No, they're in hell because we have the attitudes that we have. Slavery. Now it's child slavery, and we're not really attacking the problem like we should be doing. And we let it go on, and we have people like the one you talked about thinking that adults loving on children is okay because we don't want to offend them. I bet you she'd think differently if it was her child.
Mm-hmm. We need to end on a good note, on a brighter note. So let's talk about your podcast that you do. One more time, what is the name of it called?
The name of my podcast is Running Towards Evil. It deals with the 3 M's, murder, mystery, and mayhem. We talk about unsolved murders. We talk about missing persons. One of the shows is about defending the police and how bad of an idea that has been up to this point. And I like to give a lot of research. I like to give facts and figures to back up what I say. I enjoy doing the show. I think it's pro-police. However, if obviously there's police officers out there that need to be called out, I'll call them out. We shouldn't have bad cops. And nobody wants bad cops, even other cops. Life has changed in the police department. It's not that big blue wall of silence anymore. Bad police officers are going to be ostracized because it's going to do nothing but cause somebody else, a good officer, to lose their career. And it's just like that in the fire department. It's just like that wherever you go. Are you going to protect them against some things? Yeah, they're your brothers and sisters. They're your family. People don't understand the culture of public safety and how we do it. But not to the point where we're going to accept criminal acts. And where it's going to become a big thing, where it's going to become a thing, like sometimes it has been in the past.
Where can people find your podcast at?
My podcast is on Buzzsprout. It's on Amazon. It's on Spotify. It's on Apple. It's on all of the spots. It's even on Facebook podcast now.
Oh, awesome.
And so all you have to do is put in Running Towards Evil podcast, and you can go to Listen FM, along with the other ones that I just mentioned, and get the podcast.
Awesome. Well, Steve, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Well, this is a great time. I really enjoy it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Hey, you stuck around to the end of the video. Thank you so much for doing that. I hope you enjoyed it. If you stuck around to the very end, I'm assuming that you did. So go ahead, if you haven't already, press that like button, leave a comment down at the bottom of what you really liked listening to, and then also subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell. Go to my Instagram, More with Stumpo Podcast. Go to my Facebook, More with Stumpo Podcast. Also, go and follow Steve on Spotify, Apple. Go help him out. Follow him. Listen to his content. Running Towards Evil. It's very good. Quality stuff, especially if you like murder, mystery, and mayhem. So thank you so much. God bless you guys. I hope you guys have a Merry Christmas if I don't do any more content. God bless you, and God bless the USA, of course. Probably, most likely, yes. That was stupid.